Hello, grade 12s. Welcome to today's lesson. It's Economics with Ms. Piwe. And before the ad break, we were looking at some of the reasons why markets actually fail when it comes to environmental sustainability. And then for this bit, we are going to focus on the major international agreements regarding environmental sustainability. So since the 1990s, the United Nations has convened various meetings with all countries worldwide on issues affecting them. They should take responsibility for the management of these issues. So it's important to know that there have been big meetings between different countries in order to deal with issues that actually affect them. And environmental sustainability is one issue that affects a lot of countries. So let's have a look at some of the agreements that have actually taken place during these big meetings. So we had a meeting that was held at the Rio de Janeiro summit, where the summit took place in 1990 with the objective of sustainable development. It envisioned outcomes, or the outcomes included the environmental protection as an integral part of development. So development is encouraged, but it shouldn't come at a price of destroying our environment. Also, the cooperation to conserve, protect, and restore the health of the ecosystem was discussed at this particular summit. Also, we wanted to prevent the degradation of the systems that were polluted, and also to look at the cost of pollution in terms of the environment, and also assess its impact as well. So that was the summit that was held, and those were some of the outcomes or decisions that were taken at that particular summit. But what I liked was that there was the environmental protection was considered as the integral part of development, because the developing countries want to grow their economy, but they are doing it at the cost of the natural resources. So from the conference, it was discussed that we need to ensure that the environmental protection takes place, and that we shouldn't emphasize on expanding business at the cost of the environment, but we should find sustainable ways when we are sourcing the natural resources. And also here in our country, in Johannesburg, we also hosted a summit in 2002, which was on sustainable development. Okay, I still remember when the day that the summit was actually taking place. And some of the outcomes were the issues around getting rid of poverty, and also changing the unsustainable patterns of consumption, globalization, health, and also the environment. Okay, so it was a very big conference, and there were a lot of issues that were dealt with in that conference, because poverty was also one of the big issues, because they were in a country that has high levels of poverty, particularly in the rural communities. So the whole point of the summit was to look at ways to ease poverty in our society, but also to change these unsustainable patterns that we have as consumers, as businesses, and also as individual firms, and to say, what can we do differently in order to protect our environment? And also we looked at globalization and the impact that it plays when it comes to the sustainable environment. Remember, there were issues that the developing countries were dumping their waste onto our oceans, and then we were the ones who were paying the price for that. And there were certain agreements that were made with certain developing countries that the government actually allowed those countries to dump their waste on their oceans as well. So all of these were discussed at the Johannesburg summit that was held in 2002. Then we had another big summit around sustainable growth and development, the Rio +20 summit, also known as the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development. It took place in Brazil And the main issue was sustainable growth and also getting rid of poverty without damaging the environment. So you see that poverty and the environment seem to go hand in hand because we want to reduce the poverty rate, but we don't want to do it at the expense of the environment. So it's important that we find ways of growing our economy, but those ways need to be sustainable because we don't want to harm our economy by saying that, but we are expanding business and therefore we need to exploit natural resources. It shouldn't work like that. So these summits actually help, and there are countries that have been very successful when it comes to sustainable development. So they get a platform where they can share share their ideas and also what they have done right as a country in order to deal with issues of sustainable environment, because we can learn from other countries as well. So in this particular summit, it was agreed that a green economy would be the one of the tools that can be used for sustainable development. That sustainable development goals covering economic, social, and environmental aspects will replace the MDG from 2013. Okay, so there were some agreements that were made, and one of them was all about having the green economy. Preserving and also making sure that we protect our environment, and that there will be emphasis on issues of economic development when it comes to environmental sustainability, but also the social aspect. For example, poverty would be considered in the process of environmental sustainability, but also the environmental aspects that will be to protect the environment and also to preserve the environment will replace the MDGs, the goals that were discussed from the 2013 conference. So these are some of the big summits that we've had in the world regarding sustainable development. You can see that it's become a very important issue because now you have countries coming together to discuss this issue. So it's not just an African problem, or it only affects the East or the West and so on, but it is a global issue. And some countries, when you look at countries like China, and the factories that actually are in that country, and also the pollution levels that were taking place, that actually policies had to be put in place because the environment was becoming so unhealthy that the citizens or the residents of the country were struggling to breathe clean, fresh air because of all the pollution that was coming from the factories. I remember many years ago, I worked on a case study that was looking at the pollution that was taking place in China because of the rapid production that was happening in their factories and the negative impact that had on the environment. So all those issues need to be considered, and it's important that we discuss them when we are looking at the concept of environmental sustainability. So it's important to take note of that. You could be asked to discuss some of the summits that have actually taken place around sustainable development. So you are expected to know quite a few of these. There's quite a lot of them, but I think if you know about 3 of them, then you are covered and you are good to give a much more detailed answer in your exam. So these are the ones that I think were important and popular and had a lot of support, but also made some sound, informed economic decisions around the issue of environmental sustainability. So it's important that we know them. And also that they looked at different aspects. It wasn't just focusing on the environment itself, but also the economic challenges that the world of business faces, and also the economic social issues that we as a country have to deal with. So those were also discussed in the summit. So let's just recap them quickly. So we had the one that took place in Rio in 1992, And some of the outcomes included environmental protection as an integral part of development, because when development happens, then we know that the environment pays the price for that. I mean, you can see we are making some good progress in our country. So you look at the new residential estates that are developed, that there are eco rules and regulations when it comes to building. So you can buy a piece of land, but how you build has to ensure that it goes with the policy of environmental sustainability. So that's important. It shows that we are making the necessary steps in order to ensure that we continue to preserve our environment. Then we were also very fortunate to host a summit in Johannesburg, the Johannesburg Summit, and the focus was around getting rid of poverty and also changing these unsustainable patterns that we have when it comes to consumption, globalization, health, and also other environmental issues. So it was a good platform to have these discussions, but also to exchange information as countries to see what other people are doing right and what can we learn from them. And then the Rio Plus 20 Summit, also known as the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development, which was held in Brazil, also focused on issues of going green, having a green economy, but also looking at the economic, social, and also environmental aspects as well, because these are interrelated and they are very important. All right, so time to sum up our lesson. So in this lesson, we have covered some interesting concepts with regards to environmental sustainability, because it is a very important topic, because we've moved away from just making profits, because we want to be sustainable in the way that we conduct business, and hence it is important for us to study the environmental sustainability. So let's just go over the definition once more. So we said that environmental sustainability relates to the ability of the environment to survive its use for economic activity. So we know that for economic activity, we use the natural resources in the production process. So, but how do we ensure survival of the natural resources? And hence that will bring us to the concept of environmental sustainability. So the environment is not an unlimited resource. So another important point that we need to note, it is limited, so it has to be used sparingly so that the future generations could have access to it. And it is important that we sustain the environment so that it can be used for future generations, because if we do not sustain the environment, then the future generations will not have access to the natural resources that we as the present generation have access to. We also looked at the point or the concept of conservation. We know that it's important, and our country is doing a lot of work around this because we are a popular tourist destination, and therefore we need to ensure that we protect our natural resources and our natural species so that people will continue to come to South Africa to enjoy these environments that we have to offer as a country. So conservation relates to the preservation, which is the looking after of natural resources to ensure that they are not completely used up and disappear from the environment. So conservation is necessary due to the pollution and the overutilization of resources that is currently taking place. So we know that if we want to ensure that the future generations have access to these resources, we need to have strict restrictive policies that will protect the environment and that will ensure that we as individuals or households and businesses, when we use these natural resources, we use them sparingly, and also looking after our renewable and non-renewable resources, because with the non-renewables, once they've been consumed, and they can't be reproduced again. But even those, the ones that we can reproduce, the timing and the pacing of using those natural resources is important, because if we exploit them, if we overutilize them or we exploit them, we might find ourselves with a crisis. So it's important that we all work together in order to make sure that we protect our environment. Well, that has been a very interesting lesson in terms of environmental sustainability. I trust that you've enjoyed the lesson and you've learned so much from this lesson. From me, uSphiwe ngithi ngithanda nonke emakhaya.